tell you, the crime has gone down throughout Humboldt County. This community has become safer in all areas. We have modernized the office. We've made it more effective, more efficient. Despite budget cuts after budget cuts year after year and reducing staff, we've increased the work we've done, and we've increased our effectiveness due to that modernization.
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gallegos. Ms. Jackson.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Allison Jackson. I am been an attorney for almost 20 years now. The last 5.5 I've been with the Harlem Law Firm. I'm a partner there. It's a civil firm. We have offices both in Fortuna and Eureka. Before that, I was exclusively a prosecutor. I have over approximately 15 years experience, and 10 of which was here in Humboldt County, where I was had the honor and the privilege to handle serious felonies on behalf of the county. I tried all types of violent and serious felonies, and I specialized in cases against our most vulnerable: children, women, victims of domestic violence, the disabled, and the elderly. What you do not know about me is that before I went to law school, I actually worked for the American Civil Liberties Union for about a year. I interned in the San Francisco office, which is for Northern California. Dorothy Ehrlich was the executive director at the time, and I had, again, the great honor and privilege of doing fundraising for that entity, and worked on a resource book for individuals with immigration problems so that they would be able to receive services in counseling and medical services, especially in the areas of domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, and much more. I am running for district attorney because I believe that there are...
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. And just, I want to remind everyone to just try to speak directly into the mics. I want to make sure we pick up everything. So we're going to be now going to some ACLU questions, and for every question, there's been a random kind of drawing as to what order folks go in. So our first question: the state is facing the worst budget crisis in nearly a century, and spending on corrections is an enormous drain on the general fund. Please explain how your charging and plea bargaining policies would consider the impact of your decisions on the state budget. Do you support reducing spending on corrections? If so, how? And if not, how do you propose to fund the current corrections system? And just one more point, commentators are pretty much unanimous in the state of California. 90% of criminal cases are resolved by plea bargain. So, our first speaker, Mr. King, please.
Thank you. The question's in two parts. Explain how your charging and plea bargaining policies would consider the impact of the decisions on the state budget. And the second part is about reducing spending on corrections. So as to the first part, I think it's important to realize that the jails are run by the counties, but the prisons are run by the state. In California, we spend around $10 billion a year on our prison system. In my understanding, it costs something around the lines of $50,000 per person per year in prison. That's an enormous amount of money. And really what it raises, to my mind, is two very important questions of opportunity cost. The two questions are: what might be gained by spending that money elsewhere, some portion of that money elsewhere, that the state may choose to spend it. The second question is: what are we losing by sending some of those people to prison instead of sending them elsewhere? So it's a financial opportunity cost, and it is a human opportunity cost. I think that when the DA decides to charge a felony, he's also got to decide at that time if he's going to ask for prison or not. Make that very clear to the other side based on the facts, and you can scope things down a little bit there for the defendant in the court system. And that gets into 3 strikes and drug offenses, which I think will be covered later this evening. Those are the 2 biggest areas that perhaps are available for that consideration. As to reducing spending on corrections, I am in favor of that. We have, I think, the highest incarceration rate in California in the United States of America, with the exception of Texas. And it's one of the highest in the world, is my understanding, so I'm in favor of reducing spending there. I think you've really got to figure out what types of people are being sent to prison, and what you need to do is take a look at what's going on. The California state prison system is now in almost a state of receivership under the federal courts because we have so many people in it due to overcrowding, so we've got to reduce the amount of people we're spending there. I think the main thing to look at is, I think, our drug policies, particularly here in Humboldt County. Marijuana is important, but also other forms of drugs, people that are being sent to prison.
Time. Thank you, Mr. Hagan. Ms. Bryce?
Thank you. Well, obviously, the budget crisis is important enough for me to take a 20% pay cut, which is $30,000. But in terms of how plea bargaining and policies would change, first of all, there's certain things that shouldn't be charged at all, namely drunk in public, unless it leads to some other form of violence. In Contra Costa County, they don't charge these at all. That's something we could look at, because small misdemeanor cases are clogging our courtrooms right now. As far as reducing spend on corrections, I would be in favor of that. I think that like Mr. Hagan said, when you're looking at the case, you should also be looking at a resolution. There are certain cases that should not be pled out unless the facts warrant it. You know, murder, violent crimes against women and children, and sex abuse cases. But I think what's really important is the distinction between marijuana and methamphetamine, green dope and white dope, and I think that's an important distinction to make. White dope could be considered a nonviolent crime, but if it's methamphetamine, it is responsible for more of the violence against children, against the vulnerable in our society than any other single factor. So it shouldn't be treated the same way as green dope would be treated. It needs to be treated with a lot heavier hand, and particularly those that manufacture and sell and distribute it should not be looked upon as a nonviolent offender because of all the violence that comes from methamphetamine. I'm anticipating time here.
You have a few more seconds.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Bryce. And our next speaker is Ms. Jackson.
Thank you. The question actually, I believe, is whether, how the charging and plea bargaining policies would be affected by the state budget. My response is that the district attorney's office is not funded by the state, and the obligation of the district attorney is to charge crimes according to proof. Of course, common sense dictates that the focus should be on the most serious crimes that there are, given limited resources. However, that would not affect my decisions on charging, nor how a case was settled. That decision would be based on the type of crime and the seriousness of it, accordingly also with any defendant's background. The second part of the system, the question actually calls for how do you propose to fund the current correction system? I don't have an answer to that, because I will say that reducing spending on corrections is a decision of the legislature, or it's a decision by the people of the state of California through the initiative process based on their own assessment of dangerousness of the persons that are convicted. I support whatever the people of the state of California decide through their initiative process, and I support whatever the legislature decides.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jackson. Mr. Gallegos.
Thank you. I want to reiterate what Ms. Jackson said. As the district attorney, my first responsibility is community safety, public safety. My budget comes from the county, and certainly the decisions we make as to who goes to prison, either through myself or the courts, have a big impact on the state. Our state prison system is profoundly expensive, and frankly, my position is, as a community, we need to invest in the prevention of crime. We need to front load our investment into our community, into our people, and that simply is not where we have placed our resources. However, having an obligation to make the community safe, using the resources available to us, people that endanger other people, people that cannot conform to the laws of this community, and in the process take life or endanger life, the tools given to me by the people of the state of California is the prison system, whether I like it or not. So certainly it is a problem. It is a problem, as mentioned